Peter Gleeson, a lot of talk today, particularly economic talk, but it's becoming now something that's talked about right across the community, people wanting to get back to work. When is the economy going to restart? The PM made it clear it's still 3 weeks away from easing restrictions, but it feels like the beginning of the end. Let's hope, hey?
Yeah, and I think the messaging we've seen in the last 72 hours in particular, Peter, has changed. I think there's been quite a seismic change, and we've had, Philip Lowe come out and talk about why it's important that we put business on the front foot when we come out of this. We've had Peter Costello coming out today talking about, bringing forward tax cuts. We've had Gina Reinhart come out today and talk about innovation and how Australia needs to get back on the front foot. So I think, Australians have been incredibly well behaved over the last 8 weeks, most Australians. I think we need to, the Prime Minister needs to throw us a bone. Now, what that looks like, it could be, opening up gyms, it could be opening up cafes and restaurants, but of course, making sure that we adhere to the very strong protocols around social distancing and doing the right thing. But I think you'll find, I believe, and with football coming back on the NRL on May 28, that's a given, I think we're starting to see, I believe that we are starting to see the start of coming out of this.
It's interesting, there was a report today, Chris Smith, about cash hoarding. It would appear we've all got money under our mattress more than perhaps ever before. An assessment by a professor at Swinburne University said that out there in circulation at the moment, for every adult in Australia, for every person, beg your pardon, in Australia, there's 14 $100 notes. Now, I don't have 14 $100 notes under my mattress, but it seems a lot of people do.
I haven't seen too many $100 notes, to be perfectly honest, and there's a lack of them in circulation right now. So what has happened here, we didn't just go out and have a run on toilet paper. We were actually predicting or forecasting in our own lives some kind of Armageddon. So we went for the toilet paper, we went for the basics of baking and cooking up pasta and maintaining some kind of diet at home, plus we took out all of this money, all of this cash out of our accounts in $100 bills. What was running through the minds of Australians? Maybe they just looked at Wuhan and this complete and utter, not lockdown, but lock up, and they thought this could be our life for the next 12 months. Let's prepare for it. But quite an amazing predilection to keep yourself safe. I've never seen it before in this country.
Well, I think that just shows you how worried people were at the start of the crisis. And we all should cast our mind back 6 weeks. We saw those sorts of statistics coming out from overseas. We saw statistics being modelled here about the impact in Australia. Now, thank God we're not in that position, but it was very real, and it felt very real on the streets of our big cities. It wasn't real, obviously, in Queensland, though, because the politicians are still dipping into the taxpayer funds up there. Gleeson, so you've written something today, I understand, but I can't sort of get my head around how we are paying our politicians even more because Corona keeps them in their offices. Shouldn't we be paying them less?
So 93 MPs in Queensland are going to get $30,000 between July 1 and October 31 to spend on their electoral allowance because they haven't been spending it during the coronavirus. The so-called Independent Remuneration Tribunal, independent when it comes to being on the side of politicians, has decided that they can spend that $30,000 in the lead-up. Now, the luxuries of incumbency, as you know, Peter, when it comes to politicians and political officers, it's always been there. I actually think it's probably worth between 3 and 5% during every election. But this is seriously ridiculous. $2.7 million. Can you imagine what that could have been done or used for? Maybe it could have been used to make sure that the education portal was a little bit better than what it was so that parents aren't going into a meltdown because they can't log on. Maybe it could have been done, to ensure that politicians and bureaucrats don't get paid that 2.5% extra that they're due on July 1. I just find it extraordinary, and I think that's one of the reasons politicians tend to get a bad name in this country. A good politician right now in Queensland would say, no, I'll spend that $30,000 on maybe a couple of people who are in small business that are doing it tough. They shouldn't be self-promoting themselves out of a pandemic.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. A bit of a fight down your way too, Chris Smith, because the New South Wales Deputy Premier, John Barilaro, he wants to see water that was going into the basin in New South Wales allocated away from the environment and into the hands of farmers. He says the one thing that's going to help us out of this crisis in economic terms is to lift agricultural output. The Commonwealth Environment Water Holder, that's the chief water bureaucrat, says no, that's illegal.
Well, the chief water bureaucrat and probably the federal government are the two bodies to blame for the mess that is the Murray-Darling Basin scheme. And even before we got to the coronavirus in this country, the balance was wrong. The balance was in favour of the environment over the livelihoods and the access to water from farmers. Well, now there's another major reason why we have to get the balance right. I think John Barilaro should hold the line on this, take on the chief bureaucrat in this area, take on the federal government if he has to, because this is wrong. The farmers aren't getting the right balance of what they deserve to get. And if we want them to stay on their feet, as this, wobbly economy starts to try and regain a bit of strength, we've got to protect the farmer, we've got to protect the landowner.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. Peter Gleeson, Chris Smith, thanks for your time.